The sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the quiet of first class. Then a woman's voice cut in, sharp yet wrapped in a veneer of sweetness. "Sir, there's been a mistake. You need to move immediately and give up your seat for a VIP." The atmosphere wavered. Crystal glasses trembled on their stems. Every gaze turned to a young black man sitting in seat 3A. This was Ethan Brooks, 38 years old. He looked up, his expression steady, one hand resting lightly on the polished wooden table as though the demand had nothing to do with him. But inside, a cold wave spread, not out of shock, but out of familiarity. Standing opposite him was Claire Sutton, a flight attendant with meticulously applied makeup. Her eyes flicked briefly toward a woman waiting in the aisle, Victoria Hale, 45, draped in a silver-grey suit, a diamond-studded watch, tapping impatient seconds away. "That's my seat," Victoria declared, loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "I always sit there." A murmur rippled across the cabin like wind through a crack in the door. Passengers leaned, whispering, a few phones discreetly lifted to capture a moment they already sensed was about to spiral. Ethan frowned. He had done everything right, booked early, paid in full, checked in on time. The ticket in his hand, his platinum membership card, every piece of proof confirmed that 3A was his. Yet here, his very presence was being treated like a mistake that needed correcting. He reached into his wallet and drew out the platinum card. His voice was deep and deliberate, each word etched into the air. "I am a platinum member, and this is my assigned seat." For a split second, Claire hesitated. Surprise flickered in her eyes, then vanished behind a tight, practiced smile. "I understand, sir, but this seat is usually reserved for better customers." An invisible blade had just been driven in, short, cold, enough to sting to the core. Ethan could feel the weight of judgment, the whispers slicing through the air. Does he really look like first class? Maybe he did take the wrong seat. Doubt from the crowd coiled around him like barbed wire. But Ethan said nothing more. He sat straighter, his eyes sweeping the cabin, meeting each look of suspicion head-on. Within him, a storm swelled, not fear, but memory. Years earlier, he had been told he wasn't good enough, that he didn't belong. Today, the scene replayed, but this time in front of an audience, and with someone who had no idea of the power they were challenging. Across the aisle, a young passenger tilted a phone under his jacket, secretly recording. The shaky lens caught every detail. Claire's forced smile, Victoria's arrogance, and Ethan's impossibly calm composure. A video was already in the making, waiting for a few taps to ignite across the world. Victoria clutched her crocodile, skin bag tighter, her voice dripping with entitlement. "I fly this route dozens of times. That seat has always been mine." She spoke loudly, intentionally, painting Ethan as the interloper, the man who didn't know his place. Ethan turned toward her, his voice low but carrying weight. "I fly this route as well. And today, this seat is mine." For a moment, first class seemed to stop breathing. Passengers waited, watching. Would he give in or stand his ground? The silence was so taut that even the faint hum of the air system seemed deafening. Then suddenly the faint smile on Ethan's face stiffened, and his eyes lit with a flash of steel. He knew this was not about a seat. It would not end here. It was about to explode, and the fallout would not be his to bear. They had no idea that the man they were dismissing was the founder of Hornova Technologies, a $6 billion company pioneering anti-bias technology in customer service. And the bitter irony was that, in this very moment, he was being forced to endure the exact kind of bias his company fought against every day. Claire's smile froze as she stepped back. Victoria exhaled impatiently, flicking her wrist to flaunt the diamonds, certain the crew would settle the matter in her favor. But in Ethan's eyes, a storm had already taken shape. Silent, fierce, and destined to sweep away anyone who dared to underestimate him. Claire strode quickly to the front of the cabin, her high heels striking a sharp rhythm against the thick carpet. Every few steps she glanced back, waiting. In her mind, the black man in seat 3A would eventually grow tired and stand, because until now, everyone always had. But Ethan sat tall, eyes calm and fixed forward, unmoving. He knew clearly that he had just stepped into a game where every move would decide not only the fate of a few passengers in this cabin, but the fall of an entire airline trembling on the edge. Victoria Hale remained firmly planted in the aisle. Her silver-grey suit shimmered under the muted yellow lights, her high heels grounded as though the entire cabin had been built to serve her alone. She cleared her throat and turned to the surrounding passengers, searching for their agreement. "I always sit in this seat. There must be a system error." A few heads nodded. Others frowned, quietly lifting phones, recording more closely. Ethan calmly held out his boarding pass, his voice steady and deliberate. "This is the seat assigned to me. I chose it for the legroom, because I need to work throughout the flight." The words, short and firm, landed like nails driven into hardwood, unshakable. Claire returned, standing beside Victoria. She bent slightly, her voice low enough to sound discreet, but clear enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Mrs. Hale, I'll take care of this. Please don't worry." Then, with the finesse honed from 8 years on the job, Claire leaned close to Ethan, her tone softening. "Sir, you can move to another first-class seat. It's just as comfortable. Trust me, this will make things easier for everyone." Ethan tilted his head, his dark eyes as deep as still water. His answer was sharp and final. "No, I will sit in the seat that is mine." The refusal carved through the air. Claire's smile faltered for an instant. She clenched her teeth, turned on her heel, and walked away, her polished mask of courtesy slipping. The cabin fell into a tense silence, though it lasted only a few heartbeats. A passenger in a checkered shirt near the aisle raised his phone a little higher, whispering to himself, "This is definitely going to go viral." Victoria suddenly adjusted her crocodile leather bag, lowering it to reach into a side pocket. From it, she drew a neat stack of folded bills. With a practiced gesture, she brushed past Claire and slipped the cash discreetly into the flight attendant's uniform pocket. Not a word was exchanged, only a strained smile and the slightest nod. But several cameras caught the moment in sharp focus. Claire flushed red, her hand rising unconsciously to press against her pocket, confirming the gift was really there. The atmosphere cut like ice. The dispute over a seat had now shifted into something darker, an open bribe. A woman in seat 3C gasped, whispering, "My God, they just paid her to throw him out." The air grew heavy, suffocating. Ethan watched it all unfold, showing no reaction. His heart pounded, but his face remained as calm as glass. In his mind, he remembered his early years in business, when every dollar he fought for had to be protected with everything he had. Today, once again, he was in a fight, not to guard a seat, but to expose the truth. 10 minutes later, Mark Ellison, the cabin supervisor, arrived. Tall, broad, his steps deliberate, his voice carried the authority of command. "Sir," Mark announced loudly enough for the whole cabin to hear, "we need you to vacate this seat immediately for our VIP guest." Ethan lifted his gaze, his eyes glinting like steel. "I have shown my ticket. I am a platinum member. This is my seat." Mark leaned closer, his tone dripping with mockery. "Perhaps you don't understand how we operate. We prioritize customers who actually matter." A shiver ran through some of the passengers. The woman opposite raised her phone higher, filming openly now, no longer hiding. In the aisle, Victoria sighed theatrically, her voice pitched to draw sympathy. "I have an important meeting as soon as we land. This is humiliating." Then from the back, a man's voice rang out, low but cutting through the silence. "He doesn't look like he can even afford first class." The words pierced the tense air like a blade. Mark seized the moment, leaning down until his voice hissed through clenched teeth. "We can do this the easy way, or the hard way." The cabin erupted in murmurs, sharp breaths, and the glow of phones now fixed squarely on Ethan. Ethan met Mark's gaze head-on. His words came out like thunder, steady and unyielding. "I am not moving." 6 short words, but they cracked through the cabin like lightning in a sealed sky. Mark pulled back, his face flushing crimson. He spun around, storming toward the front, his hand gripping the service phone tightly. Passengers could not hear what he said into the receiver, but his furious gestures and frantic dialing made one thing clear. The situation had escalated beyond his control. Ethan remained seated, his back straight, his eyes burning with a fire that had now been lit. Around him, whispers swirled. Cameras recorded every angle. Everyone in the cabin knew. This was no longer a simple seat dispute. This was the beginning of a storm. 10 minutes later, the cockpit door clicked open. The sound of metal striking metal echoed harshly, silencing the entire first-class cabin at once. 3 figures appeared. Captain Robert Hayes, 50, 5 years old, his face marked by decades of command, followed by Mark Ellison and Claire Sutton. Each step they took tightened the invisible cord wrapped around the passengers' chests. Everyone understood this was no longer a minor incident. This was an official intervention. Captain Hayes stopped beside seat 3A. His shadow fell over Ethan, creating a stark contrast. 3 standing, 1 seated. But in Ethan's eyes there was no fear, only a cold calm. "Sir," the captain's voice was clear, steady, honed through years of authority. "I have been informed of a seating issue. My crew has the authority to reassign seats when necessary to ensure the comfort of all passengers. Ethan lifted his gaze slowly, weighing each word before he spoke. His voice was deep and steady, carrying through the silence. With all due respect, I hold a confirmed ticket, a valid platinum membership. I chose this seat for the workspace and legroom. There is no policy that allows you to take it simply because another passenger prefers it. Murmurs rippled through the cabin. A few heads nodded in agreement. Phones, like unblinking eyes, captured every expression, every movement. Mark's lips curved into a sneer. He cut in. If you continue to refuse, we will have no choice but to remove you from this flight. A threat, cold and blunt. Ethan raised an eyebrow, showing the first flicker of surprise. He tilted his head, his voice firm. Are you saying I will be ejected for not giving up the seat I paid for? The question fell heavy into the air, like a block of lead. Victoria Hale, waiting nearby, seized the moment. She sighed loudly, her tone dramatic, like an actress on stage. Ridiculous. I have an important meeting right after landing. I have never been treated so poorly. But passengers shook their heads. A few whispered, he's the one being mistreated, not her. Captain Hayes frowned, his voice sharpening. This is your final warning. Either you move, or we will call security. The air thickened, like the sky before a storm. Ethan inhaled deeply, slowly slipped a hand into his jacket pocket. Passengers held their breath, expecting anger. But instead, he pulled out his phone, switched on the camera, and raised it to eye level. Let's be clear, he said, his voice calm but each word a blade. I am being threatened with removal from this flight for refusing to surrender a seat I purchased legally to another passenger. Mark's face flushed crimson. He lunged forward, hand reaching to snatch the phone. No recording allowed. Ethan drew his hand back swiftly, eyes unblinking. In fact, he replied evenly, there is no federal law that prohibits recording on a plane, as long as it does not interfere with crew duties. This is evidence, to protect myself. Whispers surged through the cabin. Several passengers nodded. One man muttered, he knows the law better than they do. Mark froze, his hand suspended, then withdrew, his eyes darkening. At that moment, the heavy sound of boots approached from the front of the plane. 2 airport security officers stepped in, uniforms crisp, eyes cold. The cabin seemed to shrink, filled only with the pounding hearts of many. They walked directly to seat 3A. One spoke firmly. Sir, we've been informed of a situation requiring intervention. Please come with us and exit the aircraft. The cabin erupted in whispers, curses, and the rapid clicks of phones recording. Ethan tilted his head, staring directly at the captain and at Mark. His voice rang out, deliberate, forceful. So this is confirmation. I am being forced off this plane, despite violating no policy simply for refusing to give up the seat I paid for. The question struck like an indictment in court. Captain Hayes hesitated, then answered. You are being removed for causing a disturbance. Empty words. Many passengers' eyes flared with anger. A voice rang out from the back. He didn't do anything wrong. Another passenger lifted their phone, declaring loudly. I recorded everything, including when she stuffed money into the flight attendant's pocket. Don't you dare cover this up!" Mark's face turned ashen. Claire stared at the floor, her hand still pressed against her pocket, holding the bribe. Victoria smirked, convinced victory was hers. Ethan rose slowly, his posture straight as steel. He tucked his documents into his briefcase, stepped into the aisle flanked by 2 officers. But in his eyes there was no trace of defeat, only the steady resolve of a man who had faced injustice before and knew how to turn it into truth laid bare. The cabin sat in breathless silence. They did not yet realize the man being escorted away held the power to decide the fate of the airline itself, and the real storm had only just begun. The airplane door closed behind him, leaving Ethan with a cabin full of uneasy stares and suffocating silence. His footsteps echoed softly along the jet bridge, each step striking against the cold wall of injustice. 2 security officers escorted him, their movements rigid, their eyes deliberately averted. Cool air rushed in from outside, calming the fire in his chest. Ethan paused, pulled out his phone, his fingers moving with precision. A message lit up on the screen. "Removed from flight. Classic case of discrimination. Prepare legal team." He pressed call. A steady voice filled his ear. "Samantha, it's me. Mobilize the entire legal team immediately. I want every step of the lawsuit process ready within the hour." The words carried no tremor, no haste. They radiated the calm authority of a man long accustomed to stepping into battle, whether on Wall Street or in court. Just then, a trembling but resolute female voice rose behind him. "Please, wait a second." Ethan turned. A young woman, no more than 27, stood holding her phone, its screen still glowing. Her face flushed with emotion, but her eyes burned with determination. "My name is Maria Lopez. I was seated right across from you," she said, her voice shaking, but every word firm. "I recorded everything, from the moment the flight attendant told you to move, to when that woman handed over the money." She extended her phone. The video played in sharp detail. Claire accepting the cash, Mark giving a discreet nod, and Victoria declaring with smug arrogance, "This seat has always been mine." Every word, every glance, every movement captured perfectly. Maria inhaled deeply, her hand still trembling but refusing to let go. "I couldn't just sit there and watch them do this to you. This is the evidence. You need it." Ethan was silent for a moment. For the first time since the confrontation began, his expression softened. He looked at Maria, a stranger, and yet it was as though he was seeing the last shard of justice still alive in this cold world. "Thank you," he said, his voice warm for once. "You've just changed everything." They exchanged phone numbers and emails. Maria promised to send the original footage immediately, unedited, uncropped. She even added, "If you need me, I'll testify." In that moment, beneath the harsh fluorescent lights of the jet bridge, Ethan felt a new fire ignite. He was not alone. Justice had an ally. One of the security officers cleared his throat. Clearly, even they had heard enough to understand this was no longer simple. They avoided Ethan's gaze, quietly gesturing that he could continue on. But Ethan did not rush. He stood still for a few seconds, eyes drifting toward the airplane, waiting to depart. In his mind, the puzzle pieces locked together. The bribe, the threats, the forced removal. and now the video that would spread like wildfire. This was not just the story of one passenger being expelled. This was a symbol of power abused and of truth poised to expose it before millions. He smiled faintly, not the smile of a man defeated, but of one holding the trump card. "Maria," he said, his deep voice steady. "Hold on to that video. Soon, the whole world will see." She nodded, her eyes shining with conviction. Ethan turned and walked on with the bearing of a general leaving the battlefield, not as a loser, but as someone who had secured the ultimate leverage. He knew that in the gleaming offices of Aerolux Airways, executives still sat comfortably, believing they held control. But within hours, they would realize they had provoked the wrong man. Because Ethan Brooks was not just a passenger. He was the CEO of Core Nova Technologies, a major shareholder controlling nearly a quarter of Aerolux's value. And now, with that video in hand, he also held the airline's fate. The automatic doors closed behind him, the mechanical hiss ringing like the opening bell of a storm. And a question lingered in Maria's mind, and in the minds of every passenger now replaying the footage on their phones. Would Aerolux survive the fury it had just unleashed upon itself? Just hours after Ethan left the plane, the world knew. The video Maria had sent him did not stay on her phone. It was uploaded, shared, and spread like a wildfire racing through a dry forest. The hashtag #AeroluxBias shot straight to #1 on Twitter. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, every platform overflowed with clips. Victoria Hale slipping money into Claire's uniform pocket, Mark's awkward smile, and Ethan's calm voice declaring, "I have a valid ticket. This is my seat." Comments poured in like a flood. "I can't believe this is still happening in 2025. He stayed unbelievably calm. They're the real disruptors. Fire the entire crew already. Within 2 hours, the video had 3 million views. 4 hours later, it had passed 10 million. National news outlets picked up the story. CNN's headline blared, "First-class passenger forced off flight to give up seat, and his true identity shakes the airline." In Aerolux Airways' gleaming headquarters, CEO Jonathan Harris sat frozen in front of his computer screen. His face turned pale as the trembling voice of the PR director came through the conference call speaker. "Sir, the video has gone global. Our image is collapsing." Harris gritted his teeth. "It's just a disruptive passenger. Issue a standard statement. Say we prioritize safety," and he refused to cooperate. The PR chief inhaled sharply, her voice breaking. "That's impossible, sir. The video is too clear. It shows him calm, compliant, and we confirmed his name. He is Ethan Brooks." The boardroom fell silent. A few executives exchanged horrified looks. Harris whispered, as if he could not believe his own ears. "Ethan Brooks? The CEO of Core Nova?" "Yes, sir. And shareholder records show he holds 23% of Aerolux. With allied funds, he has controlling power." It was as if an invisible hand had slapped Harris across the face. Sweat broke out, soaking the collar of his expensive shirt. In his mind, nightmarish scenarios flashed. Stock prices plunging, partners pulling out, investors dumping shares, and above all, control of the airline slipping into the hands of the very man they had just humiliated in public. At that moment, the large wall screen blared an emergency alert. Aerolux stock prices were in freefall, down 11% in 30 minutes. News tickers scrolled non-stop. Investors flee. Bankruptcy risk if crisis not contained. Meanwhile, in a private meeting room at a nearby private airport, Ethan sat with Core Nova's executive team. Beside him were COO Sarah Jenkins, the head of legal, and the communications director. No one raised their voice, but urgency burned in every eye. Sarah opened her laptop, turning the screen toward Ethan. The video has passed 15 million views. 3 senators just tweeted calling for an investigation. Global media outlets are covering it. This is your chance not only to defend yourself, but to reshape the entire airline industry. Ethan sat still, hands clasped, his eyes deep in thought. Memories of his childhood in a poor neighborhood resurfaced. Memories of being told he could not sit in a certain seat in class because it wouldn't look right. He tightened his grip, then let out a long breath. "We will not stay silent," he said. "Prepare a statement, not a complaint, but a warning." The communications director nodded quickly and began drafting. Back at Aerolux, Jonathan Harris frantically dialed the board, his voice breaking. "We have to stop this. We need to apologize immediately. We have to do something before everything collapses." But he did not realize that every move was already too late. The storm could not be contained. It had swept across the world, ripping the mask off Aerolux and placing power squarely into the hands of the man they tried to push aside. In that moment, Ethan Brooks lifted his head, his eyes shining with steel. He knew this was no longer about a seat. It was about dignity. And this time, he would not back down. On the top floor of Aerolux headquarters, the glass-walled boardroom gleamed like a bright box against the late afternoon sky. But inside, the air was thick and heavy, like stone pressing down. The senior executives sat in silence, the only sounds the clicking of pens and the sharp breaths of anxiety. CEO Jonathan Harris sat at the head of the table, his usual confidence gone. His tie hung loose, sweat soaking the collar of his shirt. Every eye in the room was fixed on him, not searching for answers, but ready to assign blame. The phone on the table buzzed violently. His assistant rushed over, voice trembling. "Sir, Ethan Brooks's office is on the line. They demand to speak immediately." The entire room froze. Harris swallowed hard, his hand shaking as he pressed the speaker button. "Mr. Harris," Ethan's voice filled the room, deep and steady, yet sharp as steel cutting through air. "I have seen the video. Millions of others have seen it too. There is no need to debate what happened. I have only 2 demands." The executives leaned forward, their hearts pounding. "First," Ethan continued, each word striking the oak table like a hammer on a nail, "the entire crew involved, including the captain, the cabin supervisor, and the flight attendants, must be terminated immediately." A wave of unease rippled through the room. Harris frowned, struggling to regain a tone of reason. "Mr. Brooks, we can suspend them pending investigation. A rushed decision like that could—" "No," Ethan cut him off, calm but cold as a blade. "Terminate them. Right now." Harris gripped the edge of the table, trying to stop his hand from trembling. "My second demand," Ethan said. "The $50 million contract Aerolux has been negotiating with Core Nova. consider it cancelled." The words landed like a thunderclap. Several executives shot to their feet, chairs screeching against the floor. Their faces drained of color. One muttered in disbelief, "God, if we lose that contract, we'll have no chance to modernize the system." Ethan did not let them interrupt. "I am the largest shareholder in Aerolux. If these demands are not met, I will liquidate my entire stake this week. And I assure you, other investors will follow. When that happens, your company will not just lose a contract. You will lose everything." In that moment, cold sweat slid down Jonathan Harris's spine. He looked around the room, faces stunned, tense, and despairing. Everyone understood. This was not a threat. This was a sentence. Harris drew a shaky breath, trying to steady his voice. "Mr. Brooks, surely we can negotiate. We apologize deeply, we." Ethan's voice cut through, firm and final. "I don't want apologies. I want accountability. I want justice enforced. And I want it now." The room went silent. The ticking of the wall clock was the only sound, each beat like a countdown to the airline's fate. Suddenly, the boardroom door burst open. A financial analyst rushed in, pale-faced, clutching a tablet. "Ladies and gentlemen, Aerolux stock has dropped 18% in the past 2 hours. Projections show it could hit 30% by end of day. Without decisive action, we are facing market collapse." A gasp broke out at the far end of the table. Another director whispered hoarsely, "Bankruptcy if we lose Brooks. Bankruptcy is certain." Harris sank deeper into his chair. He was used to giving orders, used to control, used to being praised as the savior of the airline. But now, the true power was outside this room, in the hands of the man he had dared to humiliate in the skies. Ethan's voice returned, quieter yet cutting. "You have 12 hours. Meet my demands, or Aerolux will vanish from the aviation map." The call ended. The room sat in silence, though the lights still glared bright. Harris lowered his head into his hands. The directors exchanged glances, and in their eyes there was no more debate, only fear. They all knew. It was not Ethan Brooks who needed Aerolux. It was Aerolux kneeling before him, and the ultimatum had just fallen like the final stroke of an executioner's blade. That night, the top floor of Aerolux headquarters still burned bright as if it were daytime. The cold glow of fluorescent lights spilled across the glossy wooden table where the board of directors had been hastily summoned. Some were still in golf shirts, others in suits with jackets unbuttoned, but all carried the same expression, sheer dread. Outside, Aerolux stock continued its free fall. The ticker screens flashed relentlessly. 22%, 25%. The red numbers glared like bleeding wounds. In just a few hours, billions of dollars in market value had evaporated. Jonathan Harris sat at the head of the table, fingers laced tightly as he tried to project calm, but his pale face betrayed him. When the chairman of the board slammed his gavel against the table, the room fell into silence. "We have no more time," the chairman rasped. "Brooks has issued an ultimatum. Either we comply or we collapse. What do you want to do?" A wave of whispers broke out. A silver-haired director leapt to his feet, his hand trembling. "We cannot allow one shareholder, no matter how large, to dictate the entire airline. If we fire the crew immediately, we violate personnel protocols. The union will sue. And cancelling the $50 million contract. What else do we have to rely on? A female director shot back, her voice sharp. If we don't act now, by tomorrow there won't be a company left for anyone to sue or a contract left to sign. Do you not see the market is tearing us apart? This isn't about unions. This is about survival. Chairs scraped. Voices overlapped. The tension in the room stretched to breaking. Harris closed his eyes, his head pounding like hammers. He knew Aerolux had been driven into a corner. Then a young voice rose from the end of the table, the financial analyst who had joined less than 2 years ago. His voice trembled, but his eyes blazed. If Brooks pulls his investment, every other fund will follow. The stock will nosedive without breaks. Bankruptcy is only a matter of time. We are arguing while the company is dying outside these walls. He isn't bluffing. He's already proven his power. Silence swept across the room. The weathered eyes of veteran executives dropped. The chairman turned to Harris. You are the CEO. Your final call? Harris swallowed hard. In his mind, he saw again Ethan sitting tall in first class, the unwavering gaze that now pierced through his own helplessness. For the first time in his career, Jonathan Harris felt utterly powerless. We will have to comply, he said, his voice cracking. Fire the crew and announce it publicly. Tonight. A murmur rippled across the table. Some nodded grimly, others winced, but none objected. They all knew this was the only choice to keep Aerolux alive. The legal team immediately drafted a press release. Aerolux Airways issues a public apology and confirms the immediate termination of 3 employees involved, effective at once. But as the statement was read aloud, a younger director frowned. Will that be enough? Brooks wants more than words. He wants to see action. The room fell silent again. Eyes darted nervously, heavy with fear. They all understood Ethan Brooks did not just want a few names crossed off the payroll. He wanted to send a message that real power lay in accountability and in his hands. In the corner of the room, a large screen flickered. Maria's original video was being broadcast across dozens of international news networks. Claire taking the money, Mark nodding, the captain silent like a complicit witness. Live comments scrolled endlessly. Too little, too late. Give control to Brooks. He's the one fit to lead this airline. This isn't an incident. This is a turning point in history. Jonathan Harris closed his eyes, his heart hammering out of rhythm. He knew. Even if they bowed to the ultimatum, Aerolux would never be the same again. And out in the darkness, the man who had been forced out of seat 3A was already preparing his next move, the move that would decide whether Aerolux survived or vanished forever from the skies. It was late at night, but in a private conference room at the executive terminal, the lights still blazed. The glass walls reflected the image of a small group seated around a long table. At the center sat Ethan Brooks, his expression calm to the point of coldness, as if the storm outside was only a prelude to the symphony he was about to conduct. Beside him was Sarah Jenkins, the sharp COO, with her hair neatly tied back and eyes gleaming behind thin glasses. Across from him sat Alan Price, the short but razor-voiced head of legal. To the right was Monica Torres, the communications director, her hands poised on her laptop as she tracked the torrent of news flooding the world. "The video has passed 25 million views in just 10 hours, Monica reported, her voice barely hiding her excitement. "International media, politicians, even Hollywood celebrities are sharing it. Aerolux is no longer just an airline. It has become the symbol of discrimination." Alan cut in, his tone dry and metallic. "Civil lawsuit, at least $200 million. Federal aviation law allows it. I already have the case file ready. With the bribery evidence, we can drag Aerolux straight into court." Sarah nodded, her voice steady but firm. "Not just the courts. The market will be the greater tribunal. If you pull your capital and declare no confidence in Aerolux leadership, the stock will nosedive. They will kneel." Ethan remained silent. His hand brushed lightly against the phone in front of him. On its screen, the face of Maria Lopez appeared briefly, the young woman who had handed him the proof. She was a small piece, but a crucial one in this massive chess game. His gaze deepened. He thought back to the early years of his career, when every contract had to be won through grit and intellect. Back then, he had sworn that if he ever held power, he would wield it against injustice. Tonight, that vow pulsed through every fiber of his being. He raised his head, his voice resonant and steady, like the beat of a drum. "We will not just react. We will go on the offensive. Aerolux believes this is a crisis they can smother with press releases and a few sacrificial firings. They are wrong. This is the beginning of change. And I will be the one to shape it." Monica frowned, her tone sharp with strategy. "You want to turn a personal incident into a global campaign?" Ethan nodded. "We will call for transparency in the airline industry. A binding pledge against bias. Cornova will lead the charge. They humiliated me on their plane. I will humiliate them before the entire world." Alan tapped the table lightly. "And on the legal front, I will make them pay. Not just in money, but in reputation, something they cannot buy back." Sarah's thin smile curved, her eyes gleaming like blades. "You know, Ethan, I haven't seen you this resolute in years." He looked each of them straight in the eye. "They think I am just a troublesome passenger. They don't know I hold 23% of their stock. If I must, I will buy more and take full control. Aerolux will become ours, and I will show them what justice truly means." For a few seconds, the room fell silent. Not from doubt, but from the sheer weight of his words. This was no longer a plan. It was a declaration of war. Outside the glass, the runway glowed under amber lights. The distant roar of a private jet taking off echoed like the opening drumbeat of a new battle. Sarah placed her hand on the table, her voice ringing firm. "Then let's begin. This fight is no longer just about Aerolux. It will be a message to the entire world." Ethan gave a slight nod. In his eyes, the fire of resolve burned bright. The first strike had already sounded. And from this moment, Ethan Brooks's counteroffensive began, not just to reclaim Seat 3A, but to win back dignity for millions who had been dissolved and demeaned. Dawn had not yet broken, but the top floor of Aerolux headquarters blazed with light. Jonathan Harris sat motionless in his vast office, dark circles under his eyes after a sleepless night. The screen before him glowed with streaks of red. Down 30. 1% in stock value in just 12 hours. The airline once praised as the gold standard was now being shredded by the markets like a dying beast. The phones never stopped ringing. Investors demanded answers. Major funds had already begun to pull out. His inbox overflowed with hundreds of emails from customers cancelling tickets, cancelling contracts, vowing to boycott. This was no longer a scandal. It was an earthquake, erasing the reputation Harris had spent his entire career trying to build. The door burst open. The chairman of the board and 3 senior members entered, their faces taut with tension. The chairman slammed a morning paper down onto the desk. On the front page was a photo of Ethan Brooks being escorted off the plane by 2 security officers. The headline screamed, "Aerolux's largest shareholder forced from his legal seat, airline on the brink of collapse." "Jonathan," the chairman growled, "do you understand the catastrophe we've unleashed? He wasn't just a first-class passenger. He is the man who can destroy us with the snap of a finger." Harris croaked, his voice hoarse. "I've ordered the crew fired. I've signed the apology. We're containing this." "Containing?" another director snapped, slamming his palm on the table. "The whole world has seen the video. No one believes that half-hearted apology. And Brooks just refused a reconciliation call. He's preparing something and we have no idea what." The air pressed down like a bomb ready to explode. With each passing second, fear burrowed deeper. At that moment, an aide rushed in, clutching a tablet, face pale. "Breaking news. Cornova, Brooks' company, has just issued a global statement. They're calling on all airlines to sign a transparency pledge against discrimination. Any company that refuses will be named publicly." The room convulsed. A wave of dread swept across every face. They all understood. This was no longer a personal lawsuit. This was an industry-wide revolution. And Aerolux had been named first. The chairman's voice dropped, each word falling like a hammer. "Jonathan, Aerolux has lost control. Brooks is rewriting the rules. And we, the ones who thought we held power, are nothing more than pawns in his hands." Harris buried his head in his hands, his heart heavy as stone. In his mind flashed the image of Seat 3A, the seat he had dismissed as a trivial matter only hours ago. Now it had become a global symbol, a mortal wound that could erase Aerolux from the skies forever. Meanwhile, across the city, Ethan sat in Cornova's boardroom. Screens displayed live news, Harris floundering, Aerolux's board in chaos. The news of Fly Fair, the campaign launched by Cornova, was spreading like wildfire. Sarah Jenkins leaned in, whispering, "You've left them no escape." Ethan closed his eyes, a flicker of weariness passing over him. But when he opened them again, his gaze was sharp as a blade. "Not yet. They still think they can bargain. I will show them. Dignity is never up for trade." At Aerolux headquarters, the phone rang again. The secretary, trembling, handed it to Harris. "It's Brooks on the line. He wants to speak directly to the board." The entire room froze. Harris's heart pounded. He knew this was not a negotiation. This was judgment. And the ringing continued, echoing like the scythe of death poised to fall. The phone rang out across the vast Aerolux boardroom. Jonathan Harris's hand trembled as he pressed the speaker button. At once, Ethan Brooks's voice filled the room, steady and commanding, resonating with the weight of judgment. "We meet again, Mr. Harris, but this time not on an airplane. This is a courtroom, and you are the defendants." The air thickened. Faces around the long table froze. Only the ticking of the clock echoed like the strike of a gavel. Ethan continued, calm yet authoritative. "I witnessed your employees accept a bribe, forcing a paying passenger from his rightful seat. I was humiliated in public, not because I lacked money or power, but because of the color of my skin. The video exposed everything, and the world does not forget." An older director cleared his throat, trying to interject. "Mr. Brooks, we sincerely apologize. This was an unfortunate incident. We have already terminated." Ethan cut him off, his voice sharp as ice. "Apologies do not restore dignity. Apologies do not heal wounds. I don't need empty words. I need accountability." Jonathan Harris slumped in his chair, sweat pouring down his face. His voice cracked. What do you want?" There was a pause. Then Ethan's voice came back, each word deliberate, as though passing sentence. "3 things. First, the crew involved has been dismissed, but I want it made public, immediately, at a global press conference. Second, Aerolux must sign a transparency pledge against bias, enforced under Core Nova's oversight. Third, Jonathan Harris, you must resign." The room erupted. Protests, chairs scraping, panicked breaths. Harris shot up, his face red with fury. "You can't. This is my company, my life's work." Ethan answered with a single line, his voice cutting like steel. "No, Harris. Aerolux was never yours. Aerolux belongs to the passengers, to the market. And now it belongs to the truth." The chairman slammed his palm against the table, silencing the chaos. "Enough! Do you not see the stock plummeting? Do you not see we are on the edge of collapse? Mr. Harris, you have led this company into disaster. And now, the only choice to save Aerolux is for you to step down." Harris collapsed back into his chair, eyes wide with panic. He searched the room for allies, but every gaze fell to the floor. The silence dragged, heavy as lead. At last, his voice broke into a whisper. "I resign." The chairman's gavel struck the table with finality. "Decision carried. Jonathan Harris is removed from office, effective immediately." On the speaker, Ethan exhaled. His tone softened, yet still rang with resolve. "You made the right choice. Aerolux will survive, not because of Harris, but because you finally chose to listen to justice." The room was silent, every director frozen as if swept clean by a storm. At Core Nova headquarters, Ethan ended the call. He sat tall, eyes fixed on the horizon beyond the glass window. The first rays of dawn lit his face, firm and unyielding. He did not smile, because he knew this was not a personal victory. This was a reminder to an entire industry that dignity must never be traded for profit. And the story of Seat 3A, once just a simple place to sit, had become a historic verdict, etched into the memory of millions. Seat 3A. Once, just a seat on a plane, but it became a symbol of how prejudice can quietly slip into the most luxurious cabins, and a symbol of how one person dared to stand up and defend his dignity. Ethan Brooks did not simply win a personal confrontation. He forced an entire airline to bow its head, and he forced the world to reflect. Does fairness truly exist, or is it reserved only for a select few? Management experts often say, a crisis does not create the main character. It only reveals who the true leader is. Ethan did not choose to become a hero, but his composure, his unwavering belief that legal rights are never a commodity to be bargained away, transformed him into the spark for a greater change. And the message for all of us is crystal clear. Dignity is not a privilege. It is the inherent right of every human being. If you too believe that justice must be upheld, that no one deserves humiliation simply because of their appearance, then hit like and subscribe to stand with us in uncovering stories that expose the truth. And leave a comment with just 2 words, justice, to affirm that you too stand on the side of what is right.